Greetings, traveler. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 10 years now, and a topic I've struggled with a lot in my career was what makes a game interesting? In any search I did, in any game relating topic, I couldn't find an answer. And my revelation came when I found Aristotle's Poetics, which is an ancient text for what makes a good drama. And there I found four key principles that I'm going to share today that described what makes an interesting story for a drama thousands of years ago and how I believe it applies just as well to games. So let's just jump right in. The four principles are, according to Aristotle, relevance for a story, novelty, having something new, tension, keeping the right pace, and finally fluency, keeping the right language level for the theme and the audience. There's a lot to unpack in each one of them, so let's take them one at a time. First of all, though, why would this apply to games? Well, what else does it apply to? I think it applies to movies, since movies are very similar to dramas. They also need to be interesting. They also need to talk about something new, to be relevant to the audience, and so on. They also actually apply to physical products as well, the more you think about it. When you see a bottle of shampoo or a piece of electronics or a car, you need to look at it and understand it. It needs to be relevant to you. It needs to talk to your needs and your personality and your requirements. Even conversations fall under the same topics. When you talk to someone, if everything they're saying doesn't reveal any new information to you, or it's too fast or too slow, you will get bored. And of course, you guessed it, it definitely applies to games. Let's see how. Let's start with relevance. Relevance is about making sure the topic that you choose to have in your game is part of the target audience's life. For example, games about school life are relevant to everyone because everyone went to school. And if someone didn't, then they might not be relevant to them. Furthermore, games about school life are more relevant to children who are currently in school than adults who have already left that part of their life behind them. So still relevant, but not as much as to children. Another example is games about fast cars. They appeal to men more than women because men like fast cars more than women do. Certainly more of them buy them, more of them discuss them, and so on. So it's naturally a topic closer to a male audience. Another part of the four principles is novelty. The story must reveal something extraordinary about the topic, something unique and previously unknown to the listener. For example, the hero found a foul-smelling potion, but drank it anyway. If the story was about the hero finding the potion and steering clear away from it, that wouldn't be an interesting story. There would be nothing new, nothing unexpected. Another example is the schoolgirl saw a dusty old bookstore, but she went in. If the story said she chose to ignore the weird shop and she went home and had dinner, there is not much to say there story-wise. Perhaps she went in and she thought that nobody would be there, but there she found an old grandma and she asked her if she's interested in books. Let's see where that story takes her. Another example is the example of the ex-alcoholic, ex-drug addict who ran for president. Now, you hear that and you think, well, how is that possible? How did he do that? If he did manage to do that, I'd be interested in finding out how, at least. It's an interesting story to look into. Tension is what stories need to have to keep the audience engaged in terms of action and calmness and richness and simplicity. So if a story was full of action non-stop, the audience would get desensitized and they would lose interest eventually. If the same story was full of calm scenes all the time with nothing ever happening, again, it wouldn't be a very interesting one. But if you think about a story, for example, that has a small battle, so there's some tension there, then there is a big battle, so the tension amplifies even more. Then there's a rest scene, so there's a chance for the heroes to reflect and plan ahead, and then there's a boss fight. That is a much better alteration of pace than saying battle, 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 rest, 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 rest. It's more interesting this way, and it keeps us more engaged. Another example is a story of a woman who develops a love interest, and then they have their first encounter, maybe a date, and after discussing, they find out they don't match at all, and the date ends. So she's disappointed, she's walking home alone, she thinks, oh, everything is over, and then she gets a text from the guy, hey, are you still available? Then everybody would want to know what happens in the story next. Does she stay interested and respond to him, or does she keep in her initial disappointment and choose to ignore the message? It's interesting to see what happens next. Fluency is the type of attribute that describes the type of language that is appropriate for the theme. So this is hard to understand, so let's use an example for this. A racing sim is using specific car parts, racing techniques, and so on, because it wants to amplify its theme of being a simulator. So it's not just an arcade version of the game, it's not just lightly looking into a fun and quick experience with cars, it is a simulator. It tries to simulate the experience of driving a car in real life, as closely as possible at least, in a digital console or means. So to better achieve that, it uses specific car part names, it uses racing techniques, it uses maybe real manufacturer names and so on. If it wasn't, it might have been for a different audience altogether. In a different example where we have an AFK gardening game, then we would use simple and relaxing words, soft images, and so on. Why? Because this is in the same direction as the target audience that usually plays AFK gardening games. Usually they want to relax, they want to look at pretty flowers and not do something too difficult, just enjoy being in the space and perform a few simple tasks. So here using extremely complicated botanical terms and forcing the user to research every single word would go in the opposite direction of trying to create a relaxing experience. Another example is if we have a comedy military game that uses common vocabulary instead of the correct army lingo you would expect in a military setting, then that would actually work for the game, since it's trying to make a comedy situation rather than a realistic one. If in this military situation everybody talks to each other without the proper call signs and military terms and whatnot, then that makes you think that there's something odd going on with that military base or something. So that's very much in the same direction this comedy scene is trying to take you. And that's why this purposely mistaken use of the military vocabulary works for this kind of story. So this is, in very short, how these four elements help us look at our games through a very simple lens, and with a very intuitive understanding, try to see in a high level if the story that we're preparing for a game is going to be interesting to the audience. So we talked about relevance, how it needs to be relevant to the audience. If we're making a game about submarines, then this of course means that only war fans or big machine fans or maybe sea fans will be interested. And the relevance lens can go much, much further than that, even inside the chosen theme. So let's go with that submarine game sample. we have to talk about some aspect of playing in a submarine, as a submarine, controlling a submarine, maybe having a fleet of submarines. That story itself needs to be something that the target player would find interesting. If we were to use a submarine to, let's say, have a dinner party, well, that might still be an interesting game, but it would certainly miss the target of trying to attract our intended military and sea fan target audience. So it manifests itself at many stages inside our creation process. For the novelty, here again we have to say something new. I know there is a lot of content out there and a lot of products that offer nothing new in terms of experience. For example, when you just want to watch a good action movie, perhaps there's no good action movie to watch, so you watch one that you have watched already because you know it's good. Then, in that specific case, there is nothing new to give you new information or a new angle on the action story theme. So revisiting an old story that you know already perhaps can remind you or show you things that you missed the first time. So in your mind, it still retains that value. That's why sometimes we consume content that is not entirely new to us. But comparing new and not new, certainly new content with good information in it would be very interesting. In games, we don't usually use new information in terms of education, but we use it as a new angle into an explored topic. So for example, we might say that the hero of the story is an archer who has killed hundreds of goblins, and he was very successful and he became a hero. But in this game, that archer decides to settle down and become a tavern owner. And when there is rowdy customers, he uses his archery skills to settle the situation. That is a new angle into the explored fantasy theme that might be good enough for a game. Who knows? But it's definitely something that's not very common in that space. The tension part for games is relevant because you cannot have action sequences non-stop. There needs to be a place to stop and regroup. So this just makes sure that in whatever we make, there is the proper time for respite and for challenging the user. You might have heard of the 3-stage act that very well embodies a good example of this principle. So if you'd like me to talk about it, let me know down below and I'll make a video on that topic. But otherwise, fluency is the final topic that's relevant to games. So it just makes us conscious of the kind of language that we use in our game. If we're trying to make a very serious sci-fi game, then the more common words that we use in the game, the more the game sounds casual sci-fi rather than super serious sci-fi. So language, of course, always plays a role, and the words that we use define the way our stories are perceived and our games are perceived. So keeping an eye on the fluency of our story and of our game can help us hit our right target. So that's it for today. Thank you for your time. I hope you found this interesting, and until next time, have fun.